Welcome to Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, whatever you like to call yourself. Whatever you like to call yourself, you are welcome here. At Seattle Atheist Church, we call ourselves an atheist church because you will never hear anything supernatural talked about from the podium. So a couple of quick announcements. Let's see, on May 19th, I think it is. I should be live. Yes.
I don't know exactly. Somewhere around there.
In a couple, no, so not this next Sunday, but like the Sunday after, we are on Friday. We're going to be, you're invited to do movie night at Sarah's place. So she has a nice setup for that, but we have to RSVP because we have about 9 spaces left. So please RSVP for that. And on the 20th,
it's like a theater in my apartment. It's not like in my house. Just FYI.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good to know. And then on May 21st, they're having a fundraiser here at the University Heights, and it's to raise money for this building. So it is a good cause. But it's $10 to park in the lot on May 21st. So if you drive, you might not want to park in the lot on that day. All right. So welcome. Come on up. We won't spend more time on announcements like a talk.
Oh, okay. Oh, great. All right. Let me go ahead and get started. So let me start with some background. Today I'm going to be talking about Yuval Harari. And he became famous because his first book, Sapiens, what he did in that book is he gave a complete history of humanity. And in 70,000 years, really, really a big history, going back to, our origins with different types of primates and working up until modern times. It was a great book, recommend the book. But I'm not going to talk about that book today. I'm going to talk about his second book that just came out. And in the first book, he focused on the past. In this new book, he focuses on the future. So it's called Homo Deus, and it's about the future of humanity. And it's in some ways a sequel to his first book. So I'm going to talk about that today. The reason that I think it's a great book for the church is it's actually very focused on religion. But he has an interesting definition of religion that we'll get to. And it's also focused on the whole topic of humanism. 2 things that are interesting to me. So let me start by reading a passage from the first chapter of his book. Yuval Harari writes, "For the first time in history, more people die today from eating too much than from eating too little. More people die from old age than infectious diseases. And more people commit suicide than are killed by soldiers, terrorists, and criminals combined. In the early 21st century, the average human is far more likely to die from binging at McDonald's than from drought, Ebola, or an Qaeda attack." So, high five humanity. Nice job that we got there. Be careful of the McDonald's, but other than that, we're doing very well. So that's very cool. And so this is very reminiscent of, I don't know how many of you have read the Steven Pinker book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, but Yuval Harari is definitely in that school of thought. There is progress, the world's getting better all the time. We've now gotten to the point where we no longer think that things like plagues or horrible things that happen to humanity are outside of our control. We're at the point where we think that these are things that we can deal with as countries and be able to work through famines and diseases and be able to do something about that. So now that we're at this point in history, Yuval Harari asks, well, so what's new, humanity? What should we do next? What should we focus on? And so what he argues is, given our current values, there'll be 3 major areas that we'll focus in the future. So this is, again, big picture. So first thing he says that we'll focus on is, immortality. Now that we've figured out how to cure major diseases, we'll start focusing on how to extend human life. And he starts this section by talking about the Google Calico project. I don't know how many of you have heard about the Google Calico project. So Spark was one of the alphabet companies, but this was the Calico company was a company founded by Google with the explicit purpose of, quote, solving death. So they found it to be able to solve death. Thank you, Google, for trying to extend our lifespan. He quotes Peter Thiel, who's the famous internet entrepreneur, one of the co-founders of PayPal, as writing, "You can accept death, you can deny death, or you can fight death. I think our society is dominated by people who are into denial or acceptance, and I prefer to fight it." So, this is the idea. There's, these people, especially in Silicon Valley, who are trying to come up with ways, now that they've amassed their billions, let's figure out how to, enjoy it for a few more years. So they're coming up with ways to try to extend human lifetime. He also quotes Woody Allen. Here's a Woody Allen quote. "I don't want to achieve immortality through my work. I wanted to achieve it by not dying." So, come on, that was funny.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny. Okay, so anyway, so that's goal number one of all of humanity. He said, given our current values, extend life as much as possible. Immortality might be impossible, but at least, give us 500 years, 1,000 years. Why not? I'll take what I can get. So that's goal number one. Goal number two, happiness. Focus on happiness. Now, here he gets a little controversial. Because he thinks really the only way to maximize happiness is you gotta go biochemical on it. So you gotta re-engineer the human brain, get some drugs in there. That's how you ensure that everyone ends up being happy. If science is right and our happiness is determined by our biochemical system, then the only way to ensure lasting contentment is by rigging the system. Forget economic growth, social reforms, and political revolutions. In order to raise global happiness levels, we need to manipulate human biochemistry. So, cool. Go right for the biochemistry. He points out that already 3.5 million American children take drugs for ADHD, right, Ritalin, so we're already doing it to our children. 12% of American soldiers in Iraq and 17% in Afghanistan take antidepressants or sleeping pills. So we're already doing it with our soldiers. And finally, the biochemical pursuit of happiness is the #1 cause of crime in the world. He cites this statistic. In 2009, over half the inmates in federal prison got there because of drugs. So, we're already using biochemistry to increase our happiness in different ways. He just thinks we need to get more explicit about doing it. Okay, final thing, final value that he thinks people are going to go after is he claims that people will want to become gods. Now, this seems a little crazy and a little melodramatic, but that's what the phrase he uses, so I'm going to stick with it. He writes, in order to overcome old age and misery, humans will first have to acquire godlike control of their own biological substratum. If we ever have the power to engineer death and pain out of our system, that same power will probably be sufficient to engineer our system in almost any manner we like. So we'll start re-engineering the human body, be able to experience new things, and once we manage to get eternal happiness and eternal life, well, that basically, we're making ourselves into gods. Kind of, not really, but that's what he says. Okay, so he discusses 3 ways to upgrade humans. You can do biological engineering, so you can upgrade the human biology, right, through science. You can do cyborg engineering. I always think of the bionic man. Add chips to human biology to improve us. Or, you know what? Why not just, skip the human part, go straight for strong AI, know that the days of humans are over, pass on the baton, pass on the torch to the smart, robots, and let the robot overlords take over. So that's option number 3. Okay, so this is the bulk of his book is focused on, as I mentioned before, it's focused on the subject of religion. Because for him, it's religion that's going to explain how we get from our current world to this new world that he's discussing, where we have, immortality, nonstop happiness, and we get to be God. So how do we get there from here? Well, so I'm going to give you his survey. The bulk of his book is focused on changes to religion, to how religion has changed over time. And he has a very specific way of defining religion, so I'm going to start by explaining what his definition of religion is. He writes, all too often, people confuse religion with superstition, spirituality, belief in supernatural powers, or belief in gods. Religion is none of those things. So, Yuval, what is religion then? If it's none of those things, he writes, religion is any all-encompassing story that confers superhuman legitimacy on human laws, norms, and values. Superhuman? By gosh, what do you mean by superhuman? What does superhuman mean? He writes...
Superhuman legitimacy.
That's right, superhuman legitimacy. He says, religion asserts that we humans are subject to a system of moral laws that we did not invent and that we cannot change. So really, what he's getting at here is a religion is a set of objective moral values. Really, I think it comes down to. So it doesn't have to be superstition. In fact, he spends a lot of time talking about, for someone who believes in demons, that's part of their natural world. So talking about that as superstitious is just an outsider's perspective. Really, all these gods and demons and fairies and all that stuff is just part of their natural world. So he rejects this sort of, belief in supernatural, belief in God's thing as a good definition for religion. I'm with him on that. That makes sense to me. But he has a very all-encompassing view of religion. It's necessary for his future arguments, but he includes in religion things like, not only things like Christianity and Islam, but he also includes things like Nazism, communism, and liberalism. He counts all three of those as religions. He writes, liberals, communists, and followers of other modern creeds dislike describing their own system as a religion because they identify religion with superstitions and supernatural powers. If you tell communists or liberals that they are religious, they think you are accusing them of blindly believing in groundless pipe dreams. In fact, it means only that they believe in some system of moral laws that wasn't invented by humans, but that humans must nevertheless obey. So again, he's coming back to the main point. All he means by religion is a system of values that isn't just made up by a bunch of humans sitting together. So he would, liberalism, that counts as a religion. Communism, that counts as a religion. Now, he is careful to distinguish religion from science. And in fact, he thinks they're very different spheres. He asserts that science needs religion to create viable human institutions. So he gives the example of the Three Gorges Dam. Is that how you say it? Something like that. Three Gorges Dam in China. Thank you. Three Gorges Dam and the Yangtze River. So that was a giant project that was undertaken. And he says in the case of that dam, the scientists could figure out, how much it's going to cost. The economists could figure out, how much it's going to cost. The engineers could figure out how much electricity it would produce. But what scientists can't figure out are the ethical implications of creating the dam. He says science cannot answer the ethical questions like, the fact that the dam would cause the extinction of the Chinese river dolphins. So they can't, science can't help there. Science can't help with the question of, what are the ethical implications of displacing over 1 million people to build the dam. So, one sphere is for science, one sphere is for religion. Now, I hate this distinction. It drives me crazy when people do that, the, fact-value distinction, they quote Hume or whatever. But that's what he's relying on here. He does, in passing, mention Sam Harris. So he does talk a little bit about the moral landscape, but then he very quickly dismisses it. He says, he said the basic problem with the moral landscape is we have no scientific measure of happiness. How can we tell whether saving the river dolphin would result in more happiness than generating cheap electricity? So that's a pretty quick, he gives like 2 sentences to the moral landscape to dismiss it. That was a little disappointing. But anyway, just understand that in Yuval's universe, you have science on the one side and then you have religion on the other. And religion's about values, science is about facts, and they don't, intermix between the two. Yes?
Isn't that a dichotomy?
Yeah.
I mean, a kind of a sinister dichotomy.
Yes. I think it's evil. Yes. I think it means that then we can't, make decisions about moral questions, and I think you'll end up with all sorts of, bad consequences of that. But got to go with it to understand the rest of what he's saying. So just to tell you, one of the great things about Yuval Harari's books is he makes these sweeping, generalizations, which is actually a lot of fun. But the downside of that is he doesn't actually do a lot of backup in terms of argumentation, and so sometimes you get into frustrating situations like this where he'll defend something with a couple of sentences. So there's pluses and minuses to this approach. Yeah.
Does he say outright that there's no
He doesn't say that there's no scientific... He says it's a practical issue, really. So in this case, he's not really addressing the, theoretically, could we be able to balance different amounts of happiness that would be the consequence of these things? He's saying as a practical issue, how do we weigh, providing electricity to all these people against the loss of the river dolphins? And he's saying, I don't know how to, so I'm not going to do it. And so science is different from religion and we need both. And that just seems a little too fast for me, but okay. So, all right. So this is all background to describe what Yuval Harari describes as the 3 stages of religion. So let's talk about the 3 stages of religion. Most of this is centered around the rise of humanism over the last couple hundred years, and his explanation for why now humanism is the dominant religion, at least in European and some parts of the United States, European countries. Let me explain what he means by humanism. So he writes, modernity is a deal. All of us sign up to this deal on the day we are born, and it regulates our lives until the day we die. The entire contract can be summarized in a single phrase. Humans agree to give up meaning in exchange for power. So the idea here is, in the old days, we had Christianity, we had Islam, and it gave meaning to people's lives. It gave a context. We were players in this big epic cosmic play that Christianity supplied us with. And in exchange for giving up, our status in that cosmic play, what we give up is meaning. But in exchange for that, now we can start taking more power over controlling what happens to humanity. We no longer think it's just, God creating a tsunami because he's angry with us. We think that we could maybe predict a tsunami and do something about it, or we can stop a plague from spreading. And those things are now in our power. So he writes, modern culture rejects the belief in a great cosmic plan. We are not actors in any larger-than-life drama. Life has no script, no playwright, no director, no producer, and no meaning. To the best of our scientific understanding, the universe is a blind and purposeless process, full of sound and fury, but signifying nothing. During our infinitesimally brief stay on our tiny speck of a planet, we fret and strut this way and that, and then are heard of no more. Since there is no script, and since humans fulfill no role in any great drama, terrible things might befall us, and no power will come to save us or give meaning to our suffering. There won't be a happy ending, or a bad ending, or any ending at all. Things just happen one after the other. The modern world does not believe in purpose, only in cause. If modernity has a motto, it is, shit happens. Wow, that's depressing. Okay, but also, by the way, it does remind me again of Pinker. Pinker says something very similar in The Better Angels of Her Nature. In fact, he also brings up shit happens as one of the great discoveries. He thinks it's a good thing of modernity. All right, but that still kind of, makes me feel sad. I mean, I don't know, no meaning, really? We got this cosmic play and now everything's gone. But don't worry if you're worried about this, because thankfully we have humanism. So humanism will save us from having meaningless lives. Thank you, humanism. So Yuval writes, the antidote to a meaningless and lawless existence was provided by humanism, a revolutionary new creed that conquered the world during the last few centuries. The humanist religion worships humanity and expects humanity to play the part that God played in Christianity and Islam, and that the laws of nature played in Buddhism and Taoism. Whereas traditionally the great cosmic plan gave meaning to the life of humans, humanism reverses the roles and expects the experiences of humans to give meaning to the cosmos. According to humanism, humans must draw from within their inner experiences not only the meaning of their own lives, but also the meaning of the entire universe. This is the primary commandment humanism has given us. Create meaning for a meaningless world. All right, so how does humanism enable humans to generate meaning in this meaningless world? Well, so the basic idea is humanism has moved everything from, the cosmic plan into our hearts. So what we do is we have different experiences, and then we look inside our hearts to see how we feel about things. And that becomes the moral authority that we use to guide us through our life. So no longer do we rely on gods to tell us what to do. We look inside our heart and we feel certain things, and based on those feelings, we know what's right and wrong. It's that inner spark, that inner light, which will guide us in the right direction. That's humanism. He gives an example of, there's a woman, married woman, who has an affair, next door neighbor. And he gives that example. He says, look, in medieval times, if she felt guilty about it, she'd go off to her priest. And she'd say, hey, priest, I'm feeling bad. Should I feel bad about having this affair? And the priest would say, yeah, you should feel really bad about it. Go, you can't eat meat for 6 months, and write a big check for an indulgence, and then everything will be okay. And so that's how she would deal with having an affair, feeling guilty about something. He points out that in modern times that happened, she wouldn't go to her priest, right? She'd go to her therapist. She'd go to her psychiatrist. And a therapist would definitely, if she asked the therapist, hey, was it wrong to have this affair? The therapist wouldn't say, bad woman, why did you have that affair? What the therapist would say instead is, well, you tell me how you feel about this. And depending on how the woman expressed how she felt about the affair, that's the ultimate moral authority about whether what she did was wrong or right. By looking inside herself, listening to her heart. Come on, every TV show, every movie, that's what they do, right? When they're in a moral dilemma, they always pause for a moment and examine your feelings and decide what to do. That is the modern equivalent of talking to a priest. Okay, so so heaven and hell are not in the stars. Heaven and hell are in your heart. Your heart is the ultimate authority for ethics. It's the ultimate authority for beauty. So he writes, today, in contrast, it is very easy not to believe in God because I pay no price for my unbelief. I can be a complete atheist. Ooh, that's bad. A complete atheist and still derive a very rich mixture of political, moral, and aesthetical values from my inner experience, If I believe in God at all, it is my choice to believe. If my inner self tells me to believe in God, then I believe. I believe because I feel God's presence, and my heart tells me he is there. But if I no longer feel God's presence, and if my heart suddenly tells me there is no God, I will cease believing. Either way, the real source of authority is my own feelings. So even while saying that I believe in God, the truth is that I have a much stronger belief in my inner voice. So that's humanism. So, no longer exterior God telling you what to do, is listening to your inner heart. So he makes a number, I'm not going to go through all of his arguments about humanism. He does say one thing that I think is interesting. He argues that humanism spread at the same time that governments introduced universal conscription. And the idea there is, he points out that the French Revolution's, the Declaration of the Rights of Man, was proclaimed at the exact same time in history when universal conscription was introduced. The idea is that governments, one of the reasons for the rise of humanism is governments really start to value individual humans as soon as they needed to pull all of them into war. And so it was helpful to start respecting individual humans when you need to take advantage of them to fight in your army. So he does say that there's a correlation between the two. Okay, so that's present times. That's modernity. That's where we're in. We're, as Westerners, we believe to some degree in humanism. That's replaced the old religions. We look inside our heart. But that's the second stage in religion. Third stage in religion is the decline of humanism. And Yuval argues that humanism will not survive because ultimately humanism will be undermined by science. And so let me explain why humanism is in jeopardy from science. First off, no free will. So you need free will for humanism, but according to Yuval, science, sorry guys, they've discovered there's no free will. So humanism is undermined. He gives us standard objections to free will, the stuff that we've discussed before, things like, it's really hard to make sense of free will because it's really hard to make sense of uncaused actions that are either completely uncaused or randomly caused. That doesn't feel very good as free will. But he thinks a really important part of humanism are actors being able to act on their own will, not influenced by the society not being able to be influenced by external causes. So the loss of free will undermines humanism. He does talk about an interesting experiment that I hadn't read about before. He talks about the robo-rats. Have you guys heard about the robo-rats? This is so cool. So what they did is they injected electrodes into rat brains in the reward center, and they put them up on remote controls. So they can actually train the rats to go through mazes. On the remote control, they can hit the left button or the right button to be able to reward the rats so they'll make the right turns in the mazes. And they can even get, by using the remote controls, they can convince rats to do things that rats would normally never do, like climb on really high structures by just hitting the reward system. Now, the reason that this is pretty cool is realize that from the rat's perspective, they might think they're acting of their own free will, right? Because they come along to a corner and they just say, oh, all of a sudden I want to turn right. And so they turn right. They don't know that there's a human behind the scenes hitting the button to cause them to, feel some desire to turn right. They don't know that a human is craftily guiding them to do all the stuff that they're doing. So from a rat's perspective, they're acting, thinking they have full free will when actually they're being controlled from the outside. So that's an example, humans are like that too. We don't know all the external influences on our action. And so the free will that we think we have could just be an illusion. That's we've talked about how we really don't have access to most of what's going on in our brains. So it's not surprising that, we could be driven by things completely outside of our control. So free will is an illusion. All right, so no, you have to wait to object to that one because I'm not going to try to defend it with the rat experiment. Okay, the other reason he wants to undermine humanism is he claims there are multiple selves, and the whole idea of humanism depends on individualism, that there has to be individuals, and he thinks science has undermined the idea that there's one will that defines a person. So he gives two experiments we've talked about before. He talks about the split brain patients where you have one person who has two brains telling them what to do. But he also talks about the Kahneman and Tversky experiments with the experiencing self versus the remembering self, where the selves are in contradiction of what they're doing. And so he says that it's just not right. What science is showing is that there is no single will that defines a person. So again, that undermines humanism. He writes, medieval crusaders believed that God in heaven provided their lives with meaning. Modern liberals believe that individual free choices provide life with meaning. They are equally delusional. All right, so humanism's out. So what do we get to replace it? What we get is the rise of the techno-religions. So this is the last part of his book. Yeah, this is really, these are despite all the talk of radical Islam and Christian fundamentalism, the most interesting place in the world from a religious perspective is not the Islamic State or the Bible Belt, but Silicon Valley. That's where high-tech gurus are brewing for us brave new religions that have little to do with God and everything to do with technology. They promise all the old prizes, happiness, peace, prosperity, and even eternal life, but here on earth with the help of technology rather than after death with the help of celestial beings. So, I know I'm getting short on time, so he talks about two Silicon Valley religions. One he calls techno-humanism, and the other one he calls data religion. So let me just briefly explain. Techno-humanism is less interesting. It's really about upgrading human beings to get access to unknown experiences and unfamiliar states of consciousness. He points out that we're just starting to explore what possible experiences a human can have. He points out that both whales and humans possess the same limbic system, but a whale has additional parts to their limbic system, so maybe whales can experience all sorts of things that humans can't. So now I'm jealous of whales. I don't know what they're experiencing, but apparently they're experiencing more of the world than humans are. All right, but let's move on to data religion, which I think is a more interesting thing. Data religion is all about not trying to upgrade humans to have more experiences, but about passing the torch to new kinds of entities. According to data religion, human experiences are not sacred, and Homo sapiens isn't the apex of creation or a precursor to some future human being. Humans are merely tools for creating the Internet of all things, which may eventually spread out from the planet Earth to pervade the whole galaxy and even the whole universe. This cosmic data processing system would be like God. It would be everywhere and will control everything, and humans are destined to merge into it. So remember, humanism was all about listening to your feelings. That's not true for these new data religions in the future. They're moving back outside of humans because you're supposed to be listening to the data instead of listening to your feelings. So he talks about a really interesting study that Facebook did to underline his point. So recently, Facebook did a study on 86,220 volunteers who, all these people had Facebook accounts, and they filled out a 100-question questionnaire. And then what Facebook wanted to show is whether they can predict the answers to the questionnaire based off their likes. And what they discovered is that if they only had information about 10 likes, then their algorithm could predict their answers to their questionnaire better than their work colleagues. They just have to like 10 things, and then they could predict, their answers to the questionnaires. If they had 70 likes, then they could predict better. They can now predict better than your friends what your answers to questionnaires would be. If you have 150 likes, their algorithm could do better than your family members. If you got 300 likes, it could do better than your spouse. So at a certain point, Facebook knows you better than you know yourself, right? By just the likes that you choose. So the idea here is, so in the future, computers will understand you much better than everyone else, and instead of listening to your heart, don't trust your heart. Your heart doesn't know what's going on. You should listen to Facebook. Facebook knows you better than your heart. So, all right, so I'm going to stop here with a quick summary so we have a chance to talk about it. So Yuval in the book discusses 3 stages of religion. He talks about pre-modern religion. That's when moral authority came from outside of humans. The gods decide good and evil, beauty and ugliness. Then we have the modern age with the rise of humanism, last couple hundred years. In the modern age, listen to your heart. That's what you do. That's how you decide what's beautiful and good. Listen to your heart. But in the future, we're going to give up on our heart and listen to Facebook. Listen to Facebook, or listen to big data to make decisions about the right way to lead our lives. So let me stop here so we have some time to discuss it.
Do we have questions?